A fool with a tool is still a fool. Let's help them build some of the skills so that they can apply the tool and actually create leverage. In my view, mindset, skill set, tool set, in that order always. Attitude, belief, clarity of definition. Number one, mindset, skill set, build the skills based on what we're trying to accomplish. Tools, let's use the tools to create leverage.
You are listening to the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Focivity, where we answer your questions and simplify information security for small businesses. Get the clarity you need to focus on the things that matter.
Hello, I'm Accidental CISO, and you are listening to the Mindful Business Security Show. This is the first in a series of special episodes where we explore what is basically an AI implementation playbook. Today we'll be discussing the question that small business leaders should be asking before they move forward with implementing AI in their organizations. Why do we actually want AI, and what are we hoping that it will do for us? Beyond the hype, many organizations are looking to achieve outcomes like efficiency, growth, and better customer experiences, but not all of them have a clear strategy to get there. So, in this episode, we're breaking down the business drivers behind AI adoption, what business leaders are aiming to achieve, and how those things should influence strategy. If you aren't already subscribed, you should take a moment and do that because you won't want to miss the rest of this multi-part series. You can find the show in your favorite podcast app. If you want to join in live, we record on the third Friday of each month at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern. You can find links to the live stream on the show page at focivity.com/podcast. My guest host for this series first appeared on the show in November 2025 to talk about humanely managing IT and security teams. He's a business consultant focusing on leadership, communication, sales, operations, and organizational change. His podcast, Find My Catalyst, is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I'm excited to have you back on the show to join me as we explore this playbook for successful AI implementation. Welcome, Mike Simmons.
It is good to be here and good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that this is helpful for other folks. I know that you've been experimenting quite a bit with AI in the last couple of years. You jumped in way earlier than I did on this. So can you talk a little bit about some of the projects that you've done as you've been learning and, what those projects have helped you achieve, I guess, from an outcome standpoint?
Yeah. So the most ambitious version of this, just kind of where we are right now, is a 100% local install of my brain and operating system running off of an old M1 MacBook Pro. So technology that is accessible. I joke about it as being the little machine that could, or the little engine that could. And that is the most ambitious version. But where we started and where I started was more about how can I fire myself from specific work based on an understanding of how the tools could be used? So my initial entry was with ChatGPT, so OpenAI back in October, November of 2022, when I kind of figured out a way to get myself ahead of the line and into the system to be able to use the tools. And simple things that we did on that side, and jobs to be done is very important to me. So simple things that we did is fired ourselves from doing show notes for the podcast. And that was one of the first real big jobs that we fired ourselves from. And happy to share that story. And it's these simple things where you say, how can I fire myself from specific tasks? How can I use the tool to do it? And then how can I layer in capabilities on top of it and get to a point where you're actually building your own specific systems? And I'm happy to go deep on any of those things.
Yeah. So as you got started then, you had, it sounds like, some clear objectives in mind. It wasn't just open-ended experimentation as you were going through that. Is that correct? Or was it a lot of open-ended experimentation at first as well?
It's both. It's a combination of both. So I'm not super technical. I just happen to have been involved in emerging and enablement technology for a while and get really excited about using tech to do things. And my view, when we think about emerging and enablement technology, it's new technology that helps humans do better human things. So even though it's open-ended experimentation, it is very objective-based. So there's a specific job to be done, a specific thing, specific problem to be solved. And once you understand that specific problem to be solved, then you can go in and start building out the structure to go solve for it. And then you can quickly evaluate, did this thing do what I expected it to or not? And if it didn't do it, then okay, how do we iterate? How do we adjust? If it did, how do we stabilize it so that we can move on to the next thing and then start stacking that capability? So it is both. It's kind of like the yin and yang, or two sides of the coin, which is objective based and an understanding of, hey, let's go test some things and figure out where it breaks and identify what's the worst that could happen or even what's the best that could happen.
If you were starting over today, would you change anything about the approach, like knowing what you know now, or do you feel like the approach you took was pretty optimal for you?
I like my own stuff. So on that side, I probably would say it was a good thing. Are there things that we've developed and deployed? And I say we because I've got people in my family who are doing different things inside the business and using things in different ways. And I always think of we as the team. Are there things that I've deployed that we no longer use? Yes. They've gone through some kind of end of life piece. Do they still sit out there as artifacts that we can lean on if we need to? Sure, because it doesn't take on a lot of load to just have it sitting there as an old kind of archived GPT in the ChatGPT instance. Now, when it gets into Claude code and actually building on the M1, then now there's some challenges. Like we have to really end of life things and end of life code and remove things from that platform because it no longer serves purpose. So are there things I would do differently? I don't know. There are people who would tell me, so outside experts would say this. They would say, dude, use the most current models always. You should always be using the most current frontier models. They would say, why go local? You've got all of this technology that's available in a hosted environment. The security isn't, is it really that important? All of that kind of stuff. What I would say is, in order for me to really understand how the technology is evolving, and it is evolving so fast, even since that conversation that we had way back when, the speed of iteration and evolution has been insane. I'm doing things now that I never would have thought I'd be able to. I was able to do GPTs in ChatGPT because it didn't require coding. Now I'm able to use both Claude code and Grok to work together to do assessments of applications that I'm pushing out into both the business side of things and the personal side of things, which even includes home automation. So this is, I think, layering in those foundational skills of, and you're out there in the RV, being able to rub together two sticks to make a fire is really important because you understand, hey, this is what happens when I don't have the real tech available to me. And it builds the foundational skills that allow me to be really, really good at how I build going forward because I have an appreciation and an understanding for how the technology works. But that's also the way my brain works. I would take apart things and then put them back together and just kind of understand the inner workings. That's kind of how I've approached things there. So I don't know that there's much that I would do different. I wish I would have been more public, I guess, in how we were building and why we were building, like all of those kind of things, because I see a lot of other things that are happening in the marketplace where so-called experts are out there guiding people on how to do stuff. And it does a disservice to those organizations, especially the small business owner who looks at it and starts to believe that things are super, super complicated. No, solve for one thing first, then move to the next thing. Don't try to solve for everything. Like, don't build your entire business operating system in second brain as your first go. That's not the thing. Solve for one thing that is repetitive that you might want to eliminate.
Which kind of gets to the topic we want to talk about today, which was just, why are folks using AI in their business specifically? Like that context really helps them identify, like, what is that problem we're trying to solve? What are we trying to achieve? What's that intended outcome? That if you just rush in and you don't already, just ask why, and you're just like, well, I'm just going to just do things with it. It can be dangerous. What are some of the traps, that maybe you've seen in some of what you've worked on with AI, or maybe work with some of your clients or other folks in your network that you've seen where folks can run into issues if they don't ask why. And I'm going to guess this is probably similar to not asking why in any other implementation project.
I'll share a framework that I use, which is basically me kind of eating my own dog food or drinking my own champagne as we go through this thing. And we're client number one with this thing. So I've got a small team. I've got 3 people. 3 over the 4 people on the team have Simmons as their last name. One person is an external person outside of the family, but has been part of the business for 8 years. So and we grew to 18 people and then have shrunk down. And this is a good size for us as a team right now, especially with the capabilities. So that provides a little bit of context. The biggest mistake that I think people make right now is reading about how to use the tools rather than actually going and using the tool themselves. Like just going in and doing it, like picking it up and trying something. The first prompt that I ran in ChatGPT was super, super simple. It was, how do I train my dog how to sit? And I just wanted to see what it did. Like, does it understand successive approximation and conditioning in the context of training and conditioning a dog to do certain things? If it does, then, it's got some pretty good stuff here. Maybe there's something else I could do with it. So the first piece I would recommend to folks is do something that you're not emotionally attached to. And it's something that you've got some kind of institutional knowledge around. So the first real app that I did with Claude Code, and I started it with Grok, and then moved over to Claude Code. And what I found is Grok is good for prototyping. Claude Code is good for refining and really cleaning some things up. And they work together with each other. If you have them work together with each other, you build your own team of tools. The first one that I did was a podcast studio app. So I wanted to be able to record content, like the episode that we did way back when. I wanted to record content and I wanted to be able to put it into a tool and have it do all of the editing for me, clean up the audio, cut up the video, do everything, create the transcript for the podcast. Stuff that's not core to my business. It's something I do, but it's not core to my business. And I understand the process, but I'm not emotionally attached to it. Because I wanted to just kind of see how these things work and where do things fail. So that would be the second piece I would do, is say, find something that's not core to your business, where you get to go test and apply, use the tool, apply some skills based on some domain expertise or experience, and then see what works, what doesn't work, and where do you get stuck. And if you can answer those 3 questions, what works, what doesn't work, and where do we get stuck, then we can start to adjust. We have a better view of adjusting and iterating. It's not, hey, I can use this tool to create some really cool images, which you can. And Nano Banana is really, really good at creating images. It's part of Gemini. That's one that creates visualizes complex concepts very well. Notebook LM does the same kind of thing in a different context. So the third piece, so in addition to the, hey, push the button and start testing, then do something that's not so stuck in your business that you're not so emotionally connected to it, because that'll bring some bias. The third one is test with multiple tools. Don't limit yourself to just one tool because Claude is the greatest right now or whatever, because they're all learning from each other, so to speak, based on capabilities that they're pushing out into the market. And when you start using these tools, you realize, hey, this tool does something really, really much better than another tool. And now I can be a craftsman in the way that I work.
And that's interesting you mention that, because I'm seeing similar things with folks in my network who are heavily using AI in their businesses successfully, is they're switching as new models come out based on what's giving them the best results. And, they may be using Claude Code, and then all of a sudden Claude Code's not giving them as good of results as, OpenAI or something is giving them. And they'll switch. And then when something else happens and it gets better, they're constantly kind of looking at that best of breed, uh, you know, product and bouncing back and forth as necessary. And I find that really interesting because in IT historically, once you implement something, you want to standardize on it. And this is different. People who are getting the best out of this are the ones who aren't trying to overly standardize. Like they're standardizing a workflow, but they're setting their workflow up in such a way that they can switch out the engine, so to speak, underneath over time, depending on what's going to give them the best results. And I find that really, really interesting.
It's really cool to hear you say it that way, because it shows, hey, the way that we would have historically done it, which means we're going to be Cisco versus Oracle or something like that, and that starts to get out of my technical scope. But when you go through and you say this is the vendor of choice, or I'm always going to drive Jeeps and that's all I'm going to drive, and I'm not going to cross over into a Ford. Well, the reality is both of those tools end up using the same fuel to get them to go. So gasoline goes in both of them. If you said, hey, I'm only going to put Shell gasoline in, you're kind of limited to the roads that you have to go down. But if you decide, hey, I can actually use Shell or Arco or Chevron or whatever, you gain a little bit of flexibility. You can start to move around. And I think it's kind of an interesting way to start to look at it. One of the biggest risks, I think, that's out there right now for small business owners, and you'll see this come up in large instances, like Uber had announced that they used all of their tokens in the first quarter of the year, as an example. Canva has a story out there. Again, large organizations said, we want all of our employees to go out there and really use AI tools and get comfortable with it. And they came back, and from an ROI perspective, they said that they didn't really get much out of it. It was a lot of people took the time to go on vacation. As the small business owner who has limited resources, limited capital, has to see that return on investment, be really clear about the specific test that you're running, and be comfortable with it being platform agnostic. The thing that's not platform agnostic is your brain, your internal process, your systems, the technology that enables those things that can get pulled out and put back in through the different skills that you deploy and develop. And the reason why I think this is really important for people to think about it from a future proofing perspective is, as these models continue to grow, there is going to be more and more pressure to create more margin or make these models more profitable, so that on the other side they see a return on their investment. When you compare to typical SaaS metrics, software as a service metrics, the margin was much higher with SaaS than with these models, because of the compute and the other things that you add in. What's going to happen is they're going to figure out, I either need to extract more money out of the customer by pushing up the cost, or reducing the value that's delivered to the customer from an output perspective. And you're starting to see it the way that these models work. Some people will talk about them hallucinating. I've actually had situations where Claude has gone through and has redone work that we'd already done. And I said, we've already done this. Why are we doing this? And the response has been, you got me. But all of a sudden the tokens and the compute has already been used up. So this is a long-winded way to get to where I think the future is going, and what I'm excited about, which is being able to build local. Because when you build local, now you control how your information is being used, what your capabilities are. And so many of the models on the frontier side are now being able to be used locally on your side. So anyway, that's how I think about what we were just talking about.
And that makes a lot of sense. And if you understand what you're trying to achieve with it, why you're using it, what you're trying to achieve, it helps you decide, is this something that a local model would be ideal for, or a smaller model? If you're doing something that doesn't need all of the deeper thinking or reasoning capabilities and needs something more simple, like fuzzy search, potentially, or autocomplete or something like that, you potentially could do that with a much less expensive option. And understanding what we're trying to accomplish, why we're doing these things, can make a big difference there in sort of the outcome of the project, and the outcome of the project being related to to spend and that return on investment of whether the outcome of the project is deemed to be a success from a business standpoint.
Well, and think about it where you're coming from. You're coming from an RV. You could, depending on what kind of equipment you want to pack into the RV, you could pack an entire truck of snap-on tools in there and have every different version of a socket that could be used and every different version of a Torx wrench and all of that other stuff. Or you could have a single adjustable wrench that gets used at the right point at the right time and adds a lot of flexibility. And you're just making the trade-off. Do I use one that is going to fit perfectly, or do I use one that will get the job done? And this is where you get to apply your business acumen, your critical thinking, the human in the loop kind of work. And the other, we were talking about like mistakes that folks make. When we overcomplicate it and make the technology more than it is, we end up giving it more power than is necessary. And if we come back and just get back to simple things like, what is the job to be done? What do we need to accomplish? When do we need to accomplish it by? What's the risk that we're willing to take on? Risk from a resource perspective, money, compute, access that other people might have to it, like all of those kind of things. You start to realize, ooh, there's a couple of different versions that we can approach. And that's why I think on-prem is really going to make a comeback here. And I've had people push back because they're like, dude, you're a sales guy. Why are you even talking about on-prem versus hosted and that kind of environment? I said, it's a gut feeling around capability and control that leads me to it. Plus, these days you can do, like, I literally was able to set up a Cloudflare tunnel that allows me to go and access that machine from a mobile device to write data to the database, not impact any of the code or any of the content, but actually keep records of information. And that's stuff that if you asked me to do that 3 months ago, AC, I would have told you there's no way. Like I wouldn't even have known what a Cloudflare tunnel was back then. So now we're getting into speed of access to information and learning and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of ways to solve for it. Here's the big challenge, and it gets into a model that I think is really important. It's what? And for those who are watching the live, I just put a W on top of a line, a horizontal line on my whiteboard. What is the specific problem that we're trying to solve? What is the job that we need to do? And this is just building out a hexagon. Who are the people who are impacted by it? Who are the people who have the problem? Who people care about it? Like, who are the people around it that are surrounded it? Because if we know the who's and we get their perspective around the problem or the challenge, then we reduce some of our blind spots. And then we get into the other side is why. And there's two whys. There's the why does it persist, root cause analysis. Why is it important to solve? Business impact. And when we solve for those things, we've hit the Mary Poppins approach to problem solving at the top end, and we can move into how. Like, how are we doing it today? How might we do it in the future? So just practically speaking, you're in your business, you're working through it, you're trying to figure out where does this all kind of fit and what am I doing? What are you trying to solve for? What's the smallest job to be done? What's the specific thing? Who's doing it today? Is it me? Is it somebody else? Why are they doing it? Impact. Why is it important for people to continue doing it? Is it constantly going? Is it a repetitive thing? Can we solve it with some ones and zeros? And what I'm realizing is you can still solve a lot of things with ones and zeros.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit in some prior episodes around automation and how AI is becoming a tool where folks immediately they want to automate something and folks are now like, well, we'll just use AI for that. But maybe traditional automation techniques are better for certain things. Like not everything should, not every problem needs to be solved with AI. If there is a better, more efficient way to do it with, traditional automation and that sort of thing, this is just extending what we can do. It's not necessarily replacing all of the options, and we can still select because traditional automation it's very deterministic. You're generally always going to get the same outputs for the same inputs. It's going to be very reliable. Where with AI, it isn't like that. It's probabilistic, and when they change models, you may start getting different outputs and things too. So if you're trying to do something that really could have just been done with traditional automation instead of AI, you'll probably actually it's going to be less expensive. It's probably going to be easier in the long run to maintain, even though AI might be easier to implement in the very short run. In the long run, it may be easier to implement and give you consistency.
Well, and just think about a couple of different processes that you have inside your business. So a lot of small business owners struggle with hiring. And it's like, hey, how do I hire the right people to do the right thing inside the organization without me having to stay connected to them all the time? Like, and then how do I manage those people? How do I lead those people? We run into challenges with hiring. If we use AI to automate our hiring processes where we already have a challenge, what are we going to do other than just suck at scale? Like we're gonna keep running those loops over and over and over again, and creating more waste than is necessary. And I think that's another one of those challenges is if you go through and you really narrow into, hey, what is the specific problem to be solved? I'll share an automation story, and it might be something where you can build on it from a automation from a business perspective. This is just home automation. I was in my backyard 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now. We have 3 light switches that are set up to turn on and off at a given time. They're scheduled, and the tool that we use, they were Wemo white light switches, WEMO, and they're owned by Belkin. Well, I'm in the backyard and I'm throwing the Frisbee with the dog, and one of the dogs, and the tennis ball with the other one, and the lights go out in the backyard. Now, the reason the lights went out is because it was about 10:45 at night, and that's when I had them scheduled to go out. Well, I had my phone, and I thought, all right, well, I'll just go turn them on. Well, I go to my app, and I can't log into my app. It gives me a username and password prompt, but it also has an X in the URL. I'm like, what is going on here? So I do a quick search and find out that Belkin actually end-of-lifed those switches. So my switches were still turning on and off because I had an automation set up and the server was still sending a signal to my house, but that thing has been end of life. So from a security standpoint, I'm thinking, well, what else is going on in this kind of thing? So then I asked the question, I go to Grok, which is what I've got on my phone. I go to Grok and I said, what happened here? What's the solution? And the solution is to go buy new hardware, go buy new switches. My response was, that's stupid. I know the MAC addresses of every one of those switches. They're already on my network. The signal is going through. Can I just build something? And the response from Grok was, yep, you can. So we prototyped it. I prototyped it on my phone and then loaded it onto my MacBook. And it was crap. It wasn't very good. So this is the whole thing. You prototype and then you test, and then I connected Claude Code to it, and I said, "Hey, this is what I've got. Let's fix it." Well, within 24 hours, I have all of those switches. They can run from a PWA on personal web app on my phone and my wife's phone. We can turn on and off the switches from our phone. I also have a randomized scheduler now where the lights will turn on or off during a specific time period. So they never go on or off at the same time every day. And the trigger to move all the lights is a couple of minutes to walk from the back of the house to the front of the house. So it looks like somebody's in the house actually turning things on and off. So now, like, nobody can case the joint and look at, other than if you're listening to this now and you're like, oh, well, that's all that is. But nobody can case the house and look at it and say, ooh, those lights always switch on or off at the same time. Oh, all of them turn on and off at the same time. They must be on timers. I built a better version of this in less than 24 hours. My information doesn't ever have to leave my network. I can set it up if I want to, I can convert it over and push it and do a Raspberry Pi instance of it to take care of this stuff. And my next objective is to do the same thing with our cameras. So I want, rather than have all of this stuff go out of our network, I want to keep it local first, security first, that kind of perspective. So from a home automation standpoint, by it not working and me realizing that I was still getting pinged, I was able to go through and just quickly build something that, again, 6 months ago never would have happened. 3 months ago likely wouldn't have happened. Now I'm at a point where you give me a problem, I am absolutely certain we can build a solution to it because I'm putting problem solving and creative thinking and critical thinking and through a process.
We've talked about like some of the big patterns, at least that I've seen now, which is, sort of the fear of missing out versus strategic intent. Why we're doing this, and also the tool first thinking versus outcome first thinking. Where we want to think, what are we actually trying to achieve before we pick tools and before we pick a method and that kind of stuff. Something else in the small businesses that I work with, I often see as a very strong bias for action. Of, well, that attitude of, well, doing something is better than doing nothing. In some ways, I agree with that. Like at some point, you just got to try something instead of worrying about it. But aligning that to business objectives so that your bias for action isn't just flailing at something, that it's actually aligned to the business objectives. And I think that's one of the other things I would talk a little bit now is when a small business leader says to their teams, because we all, in my audience, we also have a lot of folks that are practitioners and technical folks. When the business owner or a CEO or somebody says, we want AI, we need to do something with AI, what are they really trying to achieve or get at when they say that? Because I feel like there's a disconnect, and the teams just hear, well, we need to do something with AI. Thoughts on that, on what you're seeing in your network?
Yeah. So there's definitely the fear of missing out kind of thing is a big thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, everybody else is talking about this thing. They must be so much further ahead than I am right now. And I don't know how I'm going to catch up. Or the other side is I went out there and I tried it and it didn't work. It just didn't work. So it's not, so there's a whole group of people who would fall into either one of those camps. Everybody's doing it and I don't know where to start. I tried it and it didn't work. And then the third one is I've done it and there's some things that really work and there's some things that don't work very well. And when we're looking at how we're using different tools, so I've got the 4 main apps that I have on that MacBook beyond the fifth one, which is the home automation. I have one, which is my knowledge repository. It's basically my brain. It's everything every framework, every tool, that hexagon, quote, and you name it, it's in there. And the reason why that was important to get there is because Jen, one of the Simmonses, would ask me, she's like, hey, you want to do this speaking submission. What should we do? What's the right one for this audience? Like whatever. And I'd get frustrated because I felt like we had that conversation over and over and over again. Well, now I've got an application where she can put in the title of the conference, the description of the attendees, the sponsors, and the people who are putting it on, the key themes, and then she can push a button and it will say, what's a talk that Mike gives that would align with this? So the piece is there's a pain point that happens over and over again. And you know it inside your business. Like you're there and either the customer comes back and asks the same question or people on the team ask the same question or whatever the thing is, you feel like you're just kind of going back to it over and over again, but it's not something you've ever documented. And and on our side, we've documented because we have the transcripts, but it's hard to find because nobody knows where to go. And not a lot of people want to search your SharePoint or your Google Drive or your workspace or whatever it is. So, hey, these things continue to happen over and over again. What if they didn't have to happen over again? What could I build to solve for this? And the first version is going to suck. It is just not going to work. And you have to be okay with the idea of, hey, this is going to suck. It is not going to work. Don't explain to the person how it's supposed to work. Watch them use it and then ask them how they would like it to work, which is really hard because especially when if you're thinking really quick and you're connecting dots and you're entrepreneurial and you've just kind of have this figure it out factor and some other folks around you don't have the same figure it out factor, you're going to want to get feedback. The feedback loop is really important. And that's where you can go through and iterate. When things don't work, ask yourself, is it not working because the tool doesn't work? I mean, it's not set up for the right purpose. Is it because I've not been clear about my purpose? Or is it because I've made it really hard for someone to use? Something like that. But you're asking questions that'll help you isolate for the specific variables to go in there and start solving. And you can prototype in a public environment, not where you're putting your own IP, or the things that need to be in-house. And then once you've done that, then you can say, oh, okay, now what does this look like if I do it locally? How do I build it locally so that I can do this in a repetitive motion? So you're basically prototyping, testing, iterating, and then once you get something to work, then you determine where does it actually fit inside the organization, where do I apply it? That's what comes to mind for me when thinking about it from a business leader perspective and a business owner perspective. If you're running a small business and everybody is calling you with things, or you feel like you've got to call them to get updates on certain things, realize that each time you do that, it's disrupting their workflow. You might not be available when they need to call you, or if you're always available, then where are you for your family and all the other kind of stuff? But you might not be available when they need to call. If you're calling them, they might be in the middle of something that you don't know that they're working on, that this is going to get in the way of. So you're getting into these situations where you say, okay, or does it need to happen? Do I need to do it? Does it need to happen right now? And you kind of go through that process, and you can kind of figure out, hey, what are the things that I can actually automate inside my business? This is why I think the skills over tool thing is so important. And it's, how do you build leadership skills across your team? So you decentralized decision-making through guiding principles. You have a high level of clarity from an alignment perspective pushed out across the organization. When you do that stuff, what you're going to find is your team is going to actually work a lot faster and better, and you're going to learn faster as you go through it. That's a lot to cover in that one, but it's if your team is dependent on you and you are the O-ring in your business, you're in trouble. How can you de-risk the business by starting to push out some of the capability either to a tool that can do it, or a person from a skill perspective, or something else?
Yep. And I like that you're talking about people this whole time in all of this, because there's sort of this undercurrent with a lot of AI, with business leaders thinking, oh, we're going to replace people with this. This is a way to cut costs or improve, cost structures or cost leverage or something like that. And what really they're looking for, I think, is efficiency, enabling growth. What they should be thinking also is enabling employee productivity, not replacing people. How do we augment our people? How do we give them superpowers? How do we use this a tool as a force multiplier for the people we already have? And then some of the stuff you also talk to hits around another area that, as a CISO, I'm concerned with from a risk management standpoint is with decisions, with automating the decisions versus decision support. And this is one of those areas where, and you use the term human in the loop, that if fail-safe, where you still need to have a human who is accountable for the decisions that are being made. These are tools to help you make decisions, but they're not there for you to abdicate your decisions to. Like, they're not there to make them for you. And I think what you were just talking about there kind of hits on a number of things that I've seen, which is sort of misunderstandings where what leaders think will happen versus what they really should be focusing on trying to make happen. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Does that ring true to you, or am I off base on that in some way?
Well, I think there's a lot of stories, and there's confirmation bias will play a role in a lot of this stuff, and recency bias will also play a role in a lot of this. There are the things that get really big headlines is when Meta lays off 10,000 employees, or Oracle cuts however many thousand, or Block cuts whatever. I mean, these are organizations that are cutting more employees in one swipe inside their organization than many of us have even not only inside our business, but across all of the customers that we work with. Like that's a big like swipe that ends up happening. Some of those instances, it's coming out that the reason why they're doing it is because, and they're blaming it on AI, is because that's the cool thing to be able to do. Some people have talked about, I think Sam Altman had talked about it, is they're kind of like whitewashing or AI washing these layoffs and saying, hey, this is a thing that we're doing where we're saying they're blaming it on AI, but the reality is it's not that. This was something that the organization needed to do because they just happened to be too top heavy. So be careful what you listen to, I guess, is the big one. And the role reflective model is one that I like to use in that context. It's what's the thing? So what? Why does it matter? Now what? What are we going to do? So when it comes to the amount of data that we can get access to with these tools, ask yourself that question. What is it? Okay, so what? Why does it matter? Now what? What are we actually going to do with it? If it doesn't inform a decision, or doesn't help you move forward, it doesn't help you improve the experience for your customers, both internal and external, then maybe you shouldn't do it right now. Maybe that's not the thing to do right at this point in time. The two questions that I think are most important for everybody to know inside your business, especially small business owners: how do we make money? How do we lose money? Like, if you know the answer to those two questions, how do we make money? How do we lose money? What reduces our margin? Where do we lose because we took on the wrong customer or whatever? How do we make money? If we know those two questions, good things can follow, meaning our teams can be more creative in the way that they apply tools and technology to help improve the experience that happens for both our internal customers and external customers. The second set of questions, and you can ask this too, after you've answered those inside your business: how do our customers make money? How do they lose money? Where are you contributing to that value chain? So how do we make money? How do we lose money? How do our customers make money? How do they lose money? And then actually, I'm going to pause just for a second because I see the nonverbal and I'm like, okay, good. What questions do you have?
More of a comment, I think, is I think business leaders think that way, but I think that's an area where folks who are in other functions in the business, especially IT and technology, who are generally very inward looking, don't necessarily make that leap. They may get to, as they rise up through the ranks into, IT directors or other things, into the how does the company make money and lose money. But I don't know that too many folks, until they get maybe up to like the C level, like the CIO, start flipping that around externally. And how do the customers make money? How do they lose money as well? And start looking at that value chain from, suppliers through the company on, then down towards the end consumers. Wherever they are, however far down that chain there may be.
Why is that the case?
I think with IT folks, at least, we solve so many internal problems. And I don't know that the external stuff, at least in my experience, it doesn't get talked about much.
Yeah.
That's something that doesn't come down from the top leadership very well through the ranks into at least the technology organization. It may better in, marketing or some of the other parts of the organization that are customer facing, but as an internal, generally very internally looking team, I think IT and security don't necessarily think that way. Like in product teams, absolutely. You're making a product to help your customer do something that they do. But if you're working on business applications that are used by internal business folks in your lines of business or what have you, it just I don't know that it comes up.
Yeah. So think about it. Think about it inside your organization as you're going through it, and ask the question, hey, why doesn't it come up? And then ask the follow-up question, what would happen if it did come up? Because when you're working with people, anybody, my view, small view of the world is we all have customers that we serve. Those customers can be inside our organization. They can be outside of our organization, internal or external. Some of those customers will have the same domain as us, domain address in their email. Some of them are getting paid by us inside our business. Some of them are paying us to do certain things. But if we look at it through the lens of service, then we can go through and say, oh, okay, well, am I looking at my internal customers or am I looking at my external customers? And then for my internal customers, it might not even be, and I like the simple, how do they make money? How do they lose money? Just because most people understand cash flow. And not cash flow from a financial perspective. They understand, if I don't have enough money in my bank account to go ahead and pay for the things I want, then I either have to stop doing some things or I have to start doing some other things so that I can get access to those resources. So we understand the flow on that side. Well, it's all resource pieces. So what resources, what am I putting in? What am I taking out? What's my balance on that side? How can I improve it? What happens if I improve this thing? And you've mentioned value. Value is in the eye of the beholder. Ask the person on the other end, what do they value? Like there's a lot of value, I'm sure, that you put on that map that's behind you, where you get to put a new sticker on each one of those states that you get to drive through, and you can look at it and you can say, where are my gaps? How can I actually drive through this area to go? And maybe those are only places that you've camped versus places that you've driven through. Like however you do it, but there's value each time you get to put that sticker up there. What are the things that your people or your customers, internal or external customers, want to put up on their map? And then how can you help them do that? And when you ask those questions, then you can start to help people move forward, which is my definition of leadership. Leadership is how we move forward. My view is leaders build leaders. Leadership starts with self, and leadership is how we move forward. And when you pull those things together, you can actually help people accomplish the things they want to do better and faster, which is enablement. And we've been talking about an emerging technology that enables people to do things and businesses better and faster. That's how I would tie all of those pieces together. It's you ask better questions, you get better answers. You want better answers, ask better questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you're a huge fan of tools as well. I think one area that leaders are going to struggle if they don't really understand why they're doing things is clearly then measuring the return on investment of those things that they're doing. Yep. And so if they don't have a clear understanding of why we're doing some AI initiative, how are we really going to know it was successful? And with all the tools, you always kind of have a tool for everything. Do you have any tools there that sort of drive home how the why of something is going to connect to determining that return on investment that folks can keep in mind?
Yeah. So, and I will talk about this both on the podcast and on the YouTube channel in the context of proposal planning and effective decision making. So this would be a square. I won't draw it up on the board right now, but if at the top, it's what's the specific problem that we're trying to solve? On the left side of the square, I would write down why is it important, like the business impact of solving that problem, yes or no? Because if I know what it is and I know what the impact is, then I can start to determine, is it worth investing in? The third question I want to understand is how. What's my plan? Like, how are we actually going to solve it? And because if I understand that, then now I've got structure. I've got a 30, 60, 90, or short-term, medium-term, long-term, some kind of steps that I'm going to be able to work through, a path that's going to help me be successful. Some of that's going to be risk because I'm making an investment. It's not always going to work, but I understand why I'm willing to invest money to take on that risk. And then the next question, the fourth question is at what cost? And at what cost is both money, it's all resources. It's money. Now, as things go along, it's going to be compute, tokens, that kind of stuff. It's just another version of it. I mean, we're used to tokens. We had to use them before. If you ever remember when you'd be really careful about who was using what minutes on your cell phone service, you'd be like, yes. How do I not run out of cell phone minutes? And then do those things transfer over to the next month? Or what happens if I don't use all my minutes and all of that other kind of stuff? Like we've been through these models. So these So they're not new. There's nothing new except what has been forgotten. It's just another way to start to transfer value, right? And support investment decision making and make it simpler for folks as they go through. But my 4 big questions on that are what is it? Why is it important? Business impact. How will we do it? And then at what cost? Resources. Those will help with that investment decision making. And if you draw it up on the board and you put lines up on that square, if any of those things is unclear, like unclear about the how or unclear about the cost, you've got a guessed. If any of those things are out, then now that line is dotted. That shape can't hold water. I'm taking on risk. And now I've got a visualization to say, hey, this is the risk I have. Now, here's the thing as a business leader, you can start to determine, is this risk I'm willing to take on or not? Let's make a choice. And so when it comes to decision making, that's the broader decision making. Put up understand the what decision we're making and how, what are our criteria that we're going to use to make the decision. And now we can take a much more informed approach to doing the thing that we're doing. I think one of the most dangerous things out there is this whole idea of, all right, we just turned it on. Copilot's been turned on. Everybody go out there and use it. Figure it out. Go use it. Figure it out. Well, go use what? Figure out what? What criteria? How are we doing it? You might be technical enough as the leader in the business to know what you want to accomplish and why, but if you're not communicating it to your team, what are they going to do with that information? It just becomes another set of waste. A fool with a tool is still a fool. Let's help them build some of the skills so that they can apply the tool and actually create leverage. In my view, mindset, skill set, tool set, in that order always. Attitude, belief, clarity of definition, number 1. Mindset, skill set, build the skills based on what we're trying to accomplish. Tools, let's use the tools to create leverage. Like Archimedes said, give me a lever long enough, I can move the world. Yes, you can. It just needs to be applied in the right place. And if you don't know where to stick that fulcrum, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've never heard that saying before.
Which one?
I like that. A fool with a tool is still a fool.
Oh yeah. Well, that one's not mine. That one's been out there for a bit. The mindset, skill set, tool set in that order always is mine. And it's one of the things I speak about. It's how do you help people think differently about it? It's so easy to buy a tool. When you think about it, you're like, ooh, you know what? If I get that thing, then the next time I need to change a tire inside the RV, I'm going to be able to do it that much faster. And I'm going to invest in that thing or whatever. If I get this cool thing to clean up the grill, things are going to move so much faster. But how often, like if you don't have the skill to apply it, now it just sits there. It's kind of like, and I'm sure some of the people that are listening, heck, I've got a lot of putters around here. How many people have ever gone out and bought a treadmill because they were going to get in shape? And then that treadmill ends up being used to hold on to clothes. Yet the tool is really easy to justify. I invested in it. I felt good for that moment. I got the dopamine hit. Build skills before tools.
That's fantastic. So we're coming up on the end of the show. We didn't have any callers today, but for these special episodes, this is something we may not have callers on these, and that's okay. When we did the special episodes about starting a business a couple of years ago, that was another one where we didn't have callers on those because there was just so much content to get through. So I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing what you've learned with this, and especially your business perspective as well, because so much of AI is being looked at as a technical thing. And I really strongly believe that most of the problems still that we're dealing with AI implementation and making them successful in organizations, it's not about the technology. It's like you said, the mindset, skill set, then tool set. It's organizational change 101. We know how to do these things. We just have to make sure we follow a methodical process through it to understand what is it we're trying to do before we start doing things. It's just such a huge help. So
awesome. Well, I'm looking forward. We're going to continue the series, right?
Yes. Yeah. We've got several more of these to go through as we work through this. So, looking at, sort of like you were laying things out, the who, what, when, where, why, how, those kinds of questions. We're going to step through those. And we're starting with why. Why are we doing this? And off the top of my head, I don't remember which episode is next in this, but, we're going to go through in a structured way and we'll spend an episode talking about, now, what should be automated and who should be doing the automation, like who should be involved in those things. When should these things be done? Tying back to a comment that you made earlier about if you don't fully understand the problem that you're solving yet, automating it, even with traditional automation, you can automate yourself into a world of hurt, and then you throw AI that has its own thoughts and opinions, or so it seems, into the mix as well. Things can go sideways. So yeah, we're gonna step through kind of looking at different angles of this as we go through, just to kind of go through the playbook and make sure that things are really being thought through before just, doing things so that folks aren't flailing and making bad decisions and rushing into it and spending money that they don't really need to spend or shouldn't spend, and, make it easier to actually see a positive return on the investment.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, Mike, if folks are interested in reaching out to you, where could they find you online?
Yeah, the best place to go is you could find your Catalyst at findmycatalyst.com. That's the newsletter. You subscribe there, you get this kind of content, leadership, culture, revenue, execution, those 4 pillars in a weekly newsletter that we put out. And then from there, there's more ways to, if it's interesting, then you can figure out ways to connect with me directly on that side. I am learning as I go. I am sharing as I do it. And I am very, very happy to be on this planet while we're going through all of this kind of stuff, because it's really neat to see what you literally can build stuff that I used to have to go and have meetings with people, and then after meetings with people around building some of these things, it would drive them nuts when I provide feedback over and over and over again. And the cool thing about the AI tools, they're not emotionally connected to any of the feedback that they're getting from me. And it's just it's awesome to operate in this environment, and I'm learning how do you connect business acumen with technical capability, and that's a pretty cool thing to learn as you go through. So you find your Catalyst at findmycatalyst.com, and I'll continue to share the journey there as well.
And if you're listening and want to see more information about any of the tools that Mike talked about, I'll include those in the show notes. As well, if he's got YouTube videos about any of those specific things that kind of go in more in depth that you can watch. And actually, since this is audio only, you couldn't see the whiteboard behind him. You'd be actually able to see him step through those, activities or those tools and how to use them. Mike, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was great. I think this is going to be a really helpful series for folks. I also want to thank the listeners. If you guys are listening to the show at a later time, we're doing this for you. I love that you're listening, and you're always welcome to participate in the show. Hit up the show page, focivity.com/podcast. You can sign up to be a caller on a future episode. If you've got questions, you got comments, those kinds of things, want to join in the conversation. And lastly, a huge thank you to Michael Cobran for the theme music for the show. I am Accidental CISO, and until next time, stay mindful.
Don't miss our next episode. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app and follow us on social media. Visit focivity.com/podcast. That's FOCIVITY.com/podcast for show information and links to our social media pages. This has been the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Focivity.